is evolving quickly. It's being used in the workspace. It's being used in daily lives. And as AI continues to emerge and evolve, you will see the risks are evolving, but the governance around it may not be as quick. So we're going to talk through that. Where are the challenges arising, and what is HITRUST doing about it? What is Cherry Bekaert doing about it? How can we help face some of these challenges together? But before we dive in, let's meet some of our featured guests today. How about Ryan? We start with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to maybe see all of you out there in TV land. But Ryan Patrick, Vice President of Adoption here at HITRUST. My role is multifaceted, but super passionate about AI security, third-party risk management, and generally trying to strengthen the way that we build trust between organizations. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Ryan. Keith, how about you?
Yeah, well, good afternoon, or I guess good morning for anyone who's out there on the West Coast. My name is Keith Jackson. I'm a senior manager at Cherry Bekaert. Cherry Bekaert is a top 20 public accounting firm with the traditional model of audit, tax, and advisory services. My team falls under the advisory practice and the information assurance and cybersecurity service line. Essentially, I'm just one of the leaders there that get to primarily focus on our healthcare compliance offerings, which simply just means that I work closely with healthcare and healthcare adjacent organizations to help them navigate and maintain compliance with all different sorts of frameworks and regulations and obtain certifications such as HITRUST and SOC reporting and HIPAA. And so, like Ryan, I'm pretty passionate about all things IT security and AI. And so happy to be here today to talk about that and this product that HITRUST is offering to help companies be compliant with AI security.
Absolutely. Thank you. So let's set the current landscape for the conversation. Brian, I'll start with you. When you look at AI today, what excites you most about it? And then what's concerning to you about AI being introduced everywhere?
Well, I like to tell folks that this is equally exciting as it is terrifying when it comes to AI. What's exciting about it, and I'll use the healthcare use case because I think it's pretty powerful, is utilizing AI to help providers think about things and come to conclusions and diagnoses that they may not have been able to do on their own because they don't have the breadth of the data or the knowledge that the model may have. So it could improve um, accurate diagnosis or reduce the number of misdiagnoses, and people can actually start to get better faster, hopefully. So that's really, really exciting. I mean, obviously, personally, I love to use AI in my day-to-day functions, automating processes. It's just made me that much more efficient, and it's exciting to see where it's going to go in the future. What's terrifying about it is that we are moving so fast. Someone quoted or mentioned something to me last year that stuck with me, so I bring it up every chance I get. The next evolution of AI is not 5 years from now. It's not next year. It's next month. And there are more and more tools coming to the market. And I'm not sure that we've learned the lessons of our past. Think about software development where, there were some hard lessons learned about building security in from the start, in the design phase of how the tool will work. And I think we're doing the same thing with AI. I'm unfortunately, in my role at HITRUST, I talk to the market a lot, and I'm not seeing people, really focused on the security side of these tools and these models. And they're kind of just giving hand waves because it's a cool tool and um, it helps them either generate revenue or improve efficiencies, whatever it may be. So I think we're kind of at a, a crossroad where we are either going to continue down the path we're on and we're going to see more and more AI incidents or breaches for that matter, which are happening today, or we can start to talk about what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully the model developers can actually start to build security in at the design phase and not play catch up after there's an incident.
Absolutely. And Keith, similar question to you then. Are you excited about this emerging AI, or is this something that you're concerned about or your company's been concerned about? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, both. Very similar to Ryan. So one of the things that really excites me most about AI is really just the potential to completely transform how we live and how we work. Right. And so like we're no longer in this kind of early experimentation phase of AI. AI has been around for a while, and now it's being kind of ubiquitously deployed across all industries and even from a personal perspective, and
Mhm.
in many ways, in meaningful ways. And so being in a professional services capacity, I've seen firsthand how organizations are using it to accelerate innovation just within their organizations, to increase different service offerings to their customers, to streamline operations, all kinds of things just internally. And so there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of opportunity. I like to use that word when I talk about AI. It's just the opportunity that presents itself. On a personal level, I guess I'm probably also excited about the accessibility of it. There was
Very
a
true.
time when AI was pretty limited to like research labs or massive tech companies, people who had the money and the tools to be able to use it. But now it's everywhere, and so many people are starting to use it and adopt it, and it's ubiquitous. And so I'm really excited about that. But with all of that opportunity does come some real concern. Ryan hit a lot of those. And primarily it's from the governance side. So governance and security are going to be some major issues. The fact is, really, AI adoption is outpacing the maturity of the controls and the frameworks needed to manage it responsibly. So even though we're seeing really some incredible adoption, in many cases, what we're seeing is very little structure and governance. At least that's what I'm seeing, and that lack of governance and structure is creating a gap. And in that gap, there's real risk that present themselves. And so, when you think about different use cases for AI, AI is being used to do things, and as a result of that, it could be perpetuating some biases. It could be misusing, mishandling, leaking sensitive data. Some of that sensitive data might be some of our data, and so I
Yeah.
know I'm concerned about that. I'm sure others should be concerned about that as well. AI is also being used to make decisions that affect people's lives. And so these are some really important things that AI is being used for. And so we should expect tight security and governance around that. But unfortunately, that's not happening universally. And so, my perspective is that AI itself is not inherently dangerous, but uncontrolled AI is unpredictable. And so those unpredictable systems, especially in regulated industries such as healthcare, are really a recipe for disaster, a recipe for reputational damage and customer distrust and things like that. And so yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly optimistic about where AI is going and the opportunities that presents itself, but I'm also convinced that if we don't build systems that are sustainable, there's going to be some trust issues that are going to be coming up. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, AI is it's impacting personal lives. It's a personal assistant for folks. It can be a therapist for somebody. It can be a coworker. Oftentimes, I think we've all seen that in the workplace. And the data we put into these AI systems, the questions we're asking it can create a lot of efficiency, but it can also create a lot of new risk. And the accuracy is the information protected? Where is it pulling from? Who has access to this information? These are all things that are creating new challenges for organizations. And AI is not going to stop evolving, and it allows companies to unlock new potential. But with that, the regulation is a big question and concern. So I want to talk a little bit about the the structured framework for AI security. Is that something that you're seeing importance for right now? Keith, I'll start with you. Is that something that you see in the workplace as something your customers and your clients and even maybe your own business need to protect yourselves from AI risk?
yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And the short answer to that is yes. Structure is very important because without structure, really, AI governance becomes guesswork, right? And so organizations are moving fast and adopting AI, right? So organizations are developing, they're deploying, they're scaling all these AI models across various business functions. But without a clear and unified approach to assess that risk and to ensure accountability, things can really go awry. And so, So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to make sure that there is a formal process in place to evaluate all of that. And I think that's what HITRUST has done a good job of as it pertains to the HITRUST AI security framework, is recognizing a lack of structure and a need for governance and putting together a program that can help companies assess that internally.
Absolutely. So, Ryan, as you know, HITRUST, we've created a new AI security program. We have a framework on AI security. What led HITRUST to create this new program, this new initiative, this new version of our framework, and how's it different than some of those other options that have been out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main driving force was we just wanted to be cool. Like, hey, let's build this AI thing. Everybody else is building an AI thing. Just kidding. I mean, it really boiled out of, HITRUST is committed to innovation. We're committed to evolution, right? When you look at other standards, regulations, or frameworks, they're not dynamic. They're not keeping pace with the way technology changes and the way that threat landscape changes. And we could foresee that AI adoption was going to explode. And if there wasn't, to Keith's point, some kind of governance or a roadmap, think guidelines on how to harden or secure the AI systems themselves, then it's going to become the Wild West. We're going to go back decades from a security perspective within these types of tools. So HITRUST, took it upon themselves to form this working group, this cross industry working group, and the working group worked for about 15 months to try to figure out what's important, how should this be constructed, what do the controls look like, let's analyze the risks and the threats. And that's ultimately what led to our AI security certification. And I would offer that historically, us in the risk management, security, GRC, whatever, all the spaces, we look to the government for a lot of guidance. We look to the government to tell us what's right or wrong. And what I'm starting to see is that government doesn't move fast enough. The world moves so much faster than the government can move. So we feel really, really strongly that we have to keep pace with change. And this is just another example of the work that we're doing to keep pace with change.
Absolutely. And then, Keith, from your experience, why is having a common assurance program, especially over AI, valuable for your customers and other organizations you've been working with?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a great question. I mean, it's very important. As Ryan mentioned, it's kind of like a roadmap, right? And so we want to make sure that these systems are being secured, protected, governed correctly. At the end of the day, there's a lot of valuable data that's going into those systems, personal data, all kinds of just sensitive data for companies in general, and that data is being used to make important decisions. And so good data going in results in good data coming out and good decisions being made that not only affect the company, but also its customers, potentially its business partners, and a variety of people. And so there's truly is a lot at stake. And just because it's a newish technology, AI has been around for a while, but many people kind of think of it as new. It's really not. But now that it's definitely being widely adopted, we can't just be lax on a system like that, right? We wouldn't do that with any legacy traditional systems that we do all these security and governance audits on, right? And so there needs to be a process for that. And one of the things that I think is valuable about the AI. The HITRUST AI Assurance Program is not only is it a framework, but it's also certifiable. It's a certifiable framework, right? It's not just a general guidance and checklist on ethical AI best practices or having certain policies and procedures in place. It truly is controls that are good for the security and governance of those systems that can be tested by an independent third party and just provide real value that those systems are in fact governed appropriately as opposed to just lip service.
Yeah, and you mentioned that certification, Ryan. Can you give a high level overview on that certification? Like, what is that? What does that mean for a company to obtain?
Well, I mean, there's different options, right? You can go through an assessment and a report is written. It is written based on current state. Whether you're doing things well or not doing things well, you're going to get a report. There's attestations, which includes very formal processes with auditors and guidelines on how that assessment needs to be conducted. But again, you could not be doing things well, and the auditor just attests that you're not doing things well. Whereas a certification, it's a bar. It's something that you must achieve in order to get the certification. So what I have found, and before I came to HITRUST, I worked for several different auditing firms doing HITRUST work along with lots of other types of security services. What I found is people will use HITRUST as a forcing function to improve, because HITRUST kind of forces them to use it as a forcing function to improve, because our controls are really granular, but we also require them to be in place for a certain time period before they can be tested and validated. And there's a scoring system with a scoring threshold that must be achieved in order to attain the certification. So, what I found with my customers and what I find with my customers today is people will actually work over time to identify and remediate gaps. Whereas with an attestation, they're not doing that in all cases. So to me, that's the biggest thing about a certification versus anything else is it proves that you've put these things in place. And if you achieve certification, the risk is at an acceptable level. It's been mitigated to an acceptable level. So uh, I think folks sometimes have to work towards getting certified, but that's also a good thing.
Yeah, Keith, what are your thoughts on the new HITRUST AI Security Certification? Do you agree, or do you find that's something your customers are looking for, and is it helping them drive confidence or something else with their business?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think we're starting to see an increase in our existing high trust customer base adopting the certification, which I think is a good thing. I think one of the things, I don't know if we've said it so far or not, but that certification is an add-on to an existing core certification, so it's not something that you would get separate from a high trust certification. And so if you're already getting an E1, I1, R2 assessment, adding this certification really just increases your overall security posture. When you add on the AI certification piece, you're just adding on additional AI controls. So it's not like a completely new assessment that you're doing. You're just adding on those very, as Ryan said, very specific and unique controls that are applicable to AI that are not necessarily applicable to other traditional systems. And so really what you're doing is you're enhancing your HITRUST certification. You're actually getting two HITRUST certifications. But you're doing that as part of one assessment. So it's not really adding a ton of additional effort. It's not its own standalone effort. There's some synergy there with your existing HITRUST certification.
Hey, Matt, if I could just jump in and
Please.
offer exactly what Keith said, but from a different perspective. I tell people not to look at our AI certification as an add-on, because that has connotations that it's more work, it's more money, I may not be ready. What I like to view it as is we don't feel AI can be appropriately hardened or secured without the underlying infrastructure that the AI system is sitting on being hardened and secured. So that's why it's the AI assessment is inclusive of one of the traditional high trust assessments, because a part of that 15-month working group, it became very clear based on the participants, and I don't think I mentioned who they were. It's the likes of Microsoft, AWS, Johnson and Johnson, Databricks, and others. They were pretty uh, poignant that the underlying infrastructure needed to be in scope of the AI assessment, or we haven't done our job appropriately and fully from top to bottom, the full tech stack, harden the environment to ensure that the model operates the way it's intended.
It's a really good point. And I know we've got a couple of different AI options out there. We have the AI Security Certification. We also have the AI Risk Management report as well. Ryan, can you give an overview on what those are? Because I want customers to understand, as you're thinking about which lane should I go down or where should I begin my AI journey? If it's with HITRUST, what are my options? Can you help explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like that's what I'm here to do. Uh, so we've been talking about the AI security assessments. That is focused on actual security controls being deployed, implemented, whatever you want to call it, within the model and around the model itself. And that assessment really is focused on AI developers, right? So the organizations that are creating these models, because they're the ones, if you think about shared responsibility, like I have Copilot on my laptop because it's built in, right? Well, me as a consumer of AI, I have no ability to manage the security of Copilot. So Microsoft is the one that has to actually go through this process to ensure that Copilot is hardened appropriately. So that security certification doesn't really apply to organizations that are just consuming AI. It's really for the organizations that are implementing, training, deploying, however you want to phrase it, the models themselves. Now, the AI risk management assessment that we have, that is more broad. It is actually focused on exactly what it sounds like, risk management of AI systems. And what we did is we blended a few different sources, most notably ISO 23894 and the NIST AI RMF, and we built this assessment that any organization can add to their existing high trust work, or they can do it as a standalone assessment. The one caveat is there's no certification for the AI risk management assessment.
Hmm.
Technically, it's a self assessment. That doesn't mean you couldn't hire someone like Keith to come in and validate it, but what you're going to get from high trust is a report based on your submission as opposed to a certification. So we've tried to build assessments that apply to the way that AI is being used today by deployers and by consumers.
Absolutely. And now, Keith, you work directly with the customers. You help them through their high trust journeys. If someone gives you a call, maybe after this session, and says, "Hey, I heard you talking about AI. Our company, we're building this great new feature or tool or system, and AI is a huge component within there. I need some help. I need to start my journey." What would you tell that customer? Like, what's the best place to get started on this certification journey if that's something they're exploring?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that would be music to my ears. So yeah, so I think a few things that come to mind. First and foremost, I would say uh, gaining internal support. All right, so there's going to be many stakeholders that have a stake for AI, right? So AI touches many areas, right? You're going to have an IT component, you're going to have security, you're going to have compliance, you're going to have legal, data scientist, all the things, and I'm sure there's even more areas that will be impacted or contribute to the deployment of that AI technology one way, shape, or another. And so ultimately getting that certification or really just getting good governance around AI is not just a security exercise. It truly is an organizational commitment. And so I think getting alignment early on in that process, meaning getting the right people at the table, the right resources allocated, and everyone really sharing that same common goal to have a secure and good AI system is important. And so without that internal support, that the process is going to stall. and it's not going to really be effective. So I think first and foremost, it's really getting that internal support to make sure that internally everyone's on the same page about moving forward. Second, yeah, definitely giving me a call because I think many people, especially if you're kind of new to AI or at least the governance aspect of it, it can seem overwhelming. You may not necessarily know what to do or if this is even kind of attainable. But I'm here to tell you that it is, even if you're starting with nothing. Any progress is better than none. And so, really, I think what we would do is we would really just kind of start with helping you define the scope of that AI environment, helping you kind of think through, what are the systems, the underlying infrastructure, the things that need to be either risk assessed or certified, and really helping define the scope because that really sets the trajectory of kind of where we go from there. And then, really, I think kind of the next phase would be just getting the necessary policies, procedures, standards, controls identified, documented, implemented. And so you've got, in a firm like Cherry Becker, you've got the expertise there of what's expected from a high trust perspective. Obviously, what industry best practices as well. But if the goal is using the high trust framework, which I hope that it is, that's one of my favorites, then we've got that experience and that exposure with what's required, so we can help you make sure that you have all the right things in place and you're thinking correctly about the controls there. And then most importantly, I think this is one of the biggest benefits is we can help you with a readiness assessment. Just like if companies that are already have a high trust certification, I would hope, or I would imagine anyway, that most of them probably did a readiness assessment first, because it is a big lift from going to not having a high trust certification to having one, and that's a big step up. And so we can do the same thing with the AI aspect as well. And so we'll kind of go through and independently test those controls against the high trust framework and make sure that things are headed in the right direction. Where we identify any gaps or anything like that, there's obviously opportunity to remediate that before moving forward with either pursuing the certification. So
Absolutely. And
so
the
really,
way I
kind of
like
to bring that all together, I would just
yeah.
say, don't wait, start, take action, and really just get that stakeholder buy-in internally, and then just kind of reach out to an assessor to help guide through
Mhm.
that process.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough to the audience. The assessors are the experts, and they're trained annually to maintain their expertise and to help you through these journeys. The way I like to think about this whole assessment journey to certification, it starts with the scoping, like you mentioned. What are we assessing? What level are we assessing it at? What's our hopeful due date of this report, and when do we want it in hand? You have to set the tone, set the schedule, and start with scoping. Once you scope it, you got to check it. Where is it today? You have to start somewhere. Maybe they have some good security, maybe not so much. Your team will come in, help them through that readiness aspect, test some controls, figure out what's missing, remediate if they need to. And once they're ready, you start the validated assessment, get those results all tested, put into the tool, sent to HITRUST. Our team will come in, do the review, and certify out on the report. And then afterwards, I always tell people, market, tell people you've got the certification. That's a good thing. That's a differentiator. That's a good way for you to share the fact that you've secured your AI, you've secured your organization's critical data, and then it's maintenance and preparation. It's making sure you maintain that certification, keep the controls and security in mind, and prepare for the next effort, whatever that may be when it comes to high trust and other areas. Um, in terms of timeline, what's realistic for a customer going through this journey? Is this like 2 weeks? Is this like 2 years? Is it somewhere else? Like what's a normal expectation for a company starting this journey?
So this is actually, I think, one of the questions in the chat. Like any good security professional, I'm going to respond with, it depends. It depends on your current maturity and current governance that you have in place today. If you have considered security to this point, then the lift may not be that much. You may just have to tweak some things because, as I mentioned, the high trust security controls are pretty prescriptive. They're pretty granular, right? It's not just a top level control statement. There's actually elements under the control statement that all have to be met in order for that control to be considered in place and functioning. So if you haven't thought about AI security at all, the validation isn't going to be the hard part. It's going to be the readiness and the remediation that's going to be the hard part. Now, this is not like your traditional high trust assessments. For those in the audience that may or may not be familiar with all the different assessments that high trust has, our largest and our historical assessment, called the R2, is pretty verbose.
Mhm.
The average number of controls is 379. The AI security certification, the assessment itself, is only 44 controls. And I'm going to put a link to the controls themselves. So the person in the chat who mentioned, you know, what are the timelines look like? What does readiness look like? Look at those controls and, be thoughtful, look internal and say, are we ready for this? If the answer is no, then the timeline's going to be a little bit longer. But to Keith's earlier point, don't wait. You got to get started, because this is one of those trains that's already moving, and you have to get on board as quickly as possible. So um, I've seen our E1, which is also 44 controls.
We love that number 44, don't we?
Yeah, we really do. Our the things we make up. It's ironic.
That magic number.
Um, that one I've seen get done in 2 months, 3 months, if the organization is really mature. I mean, and a lot of that is primarily the validation period from the time they start to the time they submit to us. It's about 2 or 3 months. That can extend out to 6 months if the organization is not really, really mature. Um, I would anticipate that the AI assessment will be similar to those timelines, because it's a similar level of effort, which is dependent on your maturity. Keith, anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things there. I think everything you said was spot on there. I think one other consideration for timeline, in addition to just current maturity, would be current buy-in and the resources that are going to be available to dedicate towards this, because there will most likely be some gaps that are identified that need to be remediated. And so being able to have the people and resources available to address those in a timely manner will ultimately help ensure this moves along quicker. And so, I think from if I were going to put numbers on it, and that's always dangerous to do, so obviously don't quote me on this, but I would probably estimate like a 4 to 6 month time frame, and here's why. So 2 to 3 months of that would be all of that preparation. So earlier, Matt, you asked me a question about what the next steps would be, and I talked about, if you called me, we would do a variety of things, such as, scoping and, getting policy and procedure and standards developed, make sure controls are implemented, all of that. So that's going to take a couple of months probably to do, especially if there's not a mature environment. But then beyond that, Ryan, you mentioned earlier about that time frame that HITRUST requires for policies and procedures or controls to be implemented, right? And so there's a 60-day requirement for all policies and procedures to have been implemented to mature before they can be tested. And then for control implementation, like the actual technical implementation of these controls, they'd have to be in place 90 days. And so that extends a little bit of time as well. So you got the readiness and remediation, but then you also have to allow any of those remediation efforts to mature as well. So you've got this kind of 4 to 6 month window potentially before you could actually start the testing. But again, that can vary based on all the factors we just talked about.
Absolutely. And for those that aren't as familiar with HITRUST, there are different options to start with, but the E1 is the easiest one to start with. It's the smallest assessment. It focuses on those essential controls, and doing an E1, adding in the AI component. It's not an add-on, but like when you truly bake those together, you're getting a streamlined security assessment focused both on AI and your underlying systems that your whole organization can benefit from to protect your sensitive data. So that is one of our most common starting paths for organizations, and something I'm sure, Keith, you see with a lot of your customers as a good exploration topic as they start their journey.
Yeah, that's right. Especially organizations that are not currently HITRUST certified but want to be. Like you said, the E1 is the easiest lift to get into there with the 44 kind of basic cybersecurity hygiene controls. Then they move up to an I1, which is 180 something controls, and then the R2, which Ryan mentioned could be somewhere around 300, but it could be a whole lot more depending on what all you want to do with it and how complex your environment is. And all of this discussion kind of brings up maybe some other factors to talk about when it comes to pursuing the AI certification as well. Is each of those acronyms E1, I1, R2 have different maturity levels that get assessed for those controls. So, for example, an E1 and an I1 is only control implementation. Policy and procedure is not included unless the control is a policy or procedure control. And then the R2 is at least 3 maturity levels. Is there policy, procedure, and actually control implementation for each of these requirement statements or these controls? And so the same is true for the AI. So if you're doing an E1, but you're also doing the AI certification on top of that, then you're only being tested at the implementation level, right? And so whereas if you're doing an R2, you're going to be tested for policy, procedure, and control implementation for the AI as well. So that the AI level of testing matches the core level of testing, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And then if you do that R2 assessment and you also include the AI security component, is that a 1-year certification? Is it a 2-year certification? Like, how does that look for those that may not be aware?
Yeah. So the acronym, right? So there, I guess I don't know if it's called an acronym or not, but the name, right? So the E1, I1, R2, the number represents how long the certification is valid for. So 1, it implies a 1-year period, 2 for 2 years. And so the AI certification would follow that as well. I think, now correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's AI1, AI2. Is that right?
It is. It is. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've got an E1, you would also have an AI1 or an
Mhm.
I1, AI1, R2, AI2. And so, yeah, so you're not doubling effort. You're not, anything like that. Like, I guess I'll now remove add-on from my vernacular to be a little more transparent there.
Not a problem.
But yeah, basically, you're really just increasing your security posture, right, and showing that you have good governance over AI and traditional systems, and so it'll follow what the core assessment is.
Yeah, so there is a time benefit for those customers that do decide to test policy and procedure and go for that R2 version of the AI. So the AI2 option, they get that longer assessment certification with that option. So there is a benefit. But for those that want the easiest path, the fastest path, the E1 plus AI1 option is the path for you. But that's what Keith is there for. That's what our assessors do. They help you understand what is a viable path, what are my needs as a business, what's a realistic timeline, what's driving this decision, and that's what they will help you through each step of that journey for everything. Yeah. Ryan, question for you. So we've been talking about AI, and you've been at HITRUST for a while. I know you used to work on HITRUST assessments before you even joined our company. With AI being this newer option that we launched last year, do you see this as like the evolution of HITRUST? Is this like the new thing that we're doing, or is like how would you quantify this in terms of the grander scale of HITRUST evolution?
I think it's right in line with what drives us every single day. We have teams within HITRUST that are maintaining the framework generally. So we have a standards team, and all they do is analyze new regulation standards or frameworks, how it overlaps with what our framework is doing. We may add those to the framework if we feel that folks need this to be added to their assessment so they can report out in multiple different languages, so to speak. But I think the AI thing is just like what we've been doing for several years now. Is, like I said earlier, trying to keep pace with what's changing and how the world is changing, and we're continuing that. Honestly, the AI thing is just another rung on the ladder. I mean, we're already looking at the idea of continuous assurance. So Keith today is used to doing one big audit once a year, and then there's a report that's issued, and that report is good for whatever in our world for however long based on the assessment type. Well, this idea of continuous assurance is Keith will be testing more frequently over the year, which should reduce the burden really for all parties, but it also will elevate the trust that's built into consuming the results of that testing, right? Because a point in time assessment or an assessment that happens once a year, it's really stressful, especially if you are an organization that has multiple different reporting requirements. Let's say you're doing high trust, you're doing PCI, you're doing ISO, you're doing SOC 2. You may be in an audit loop all year round, and continuous assurance helps with that. And then your customers or your stakeholders who would like to see the results of that testing will know that there hasn't been any control degradation or any drift within the controls environment because it's being tested at a more frequent basis. And oh, by the way, as you have changes within your environment, you can incorporate those changes into the next testing cycle. Whereas in the current model, and this is a model for everything that's out there, is you'd have to wait until that retesting period. So this is what we're doing. And I actually have been telling people, and I'm a little off, topic, Matt. So slap me around if you need to.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, you're good for now, though.
Is I don't believe, and I think I already mentioned, I don't think we should be relying on the government for our guidance because they can't move fast enough. We, as a private business, have the ability to move really, really fast. And this AI assessment, we were the first ones to come out with a security standard for AI. You may think about ISO 42001 as kind of the global standard right now, but 42001 isn't hard-nosed security controls. They're not granular security controls. It's more around governance and risk management of AI, and it spans the full breadth of responsible AI. Not to say that we supplant 42001, we actually complement 42001, but there is a difference. And people need to understand that both from a this is what I want to do and from a this is what I want my stakeholders, vendors, customers, or whatever to do from an AI security perspective, because it may not meet the intent. So I'm going to get off my soapbox first here in a second. This AI cert is just another step in what HITRUST is trying to do every single day, which is evolve and innovate.
Yeah, and I've noticed a lot of people comparing HITRUST to ISO 42001 with our AI assessment option. It's actually something that just popped up in the chat as well when we were talking about it. ISO to me, 42001 is a very broad view of AI risk, but it's not focused solely on security. The ISO version covers things like what is the environmental impact of using AI? That is an important question. And that's a good question for companies to consider, but it's not really a security concern. Whether or not you want to have a big or small carbon footprint and how well you protect the environment with your use of AI doesn't change your security risk. And that's where HITRUST differs. We are solely focused on let's make sure this information is protected, used responsibly, and also not going to get breached, changed, deleted, removed, or accessed by inappropriate individuals. Like that, we are focused on security with prescriptive controls. ISO is more broad. So we complement them, like you said, Ryan, quite well, but we're very different in terms of what our security certification accomplishes versus what their approach is focused on.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that is, if you think about the different pillars of responsible I think security as one of the pillars actually is at the foundation of all the other pillars, right? Because if your model is not hardened, not secure, quote unquote,
Hmm.
then that could have an environmental impact, right? If the model starts to, depending on what its function is, starts to behave inappropriately, there may be issues that bubble up through the other pillars of responsible AI. So that's why I personally feel so strongly about the security aspect of AI, is because it supports all responsible AI at this point. So because you mentioned the question in the chat, I think I've already kind of highlighted the differences between HITRUST and 42001. The one thing I would add from that perspective is you can actually use HITRUST to satisfy Appendix A of 42001, or you can do both and achieve both, and you will walk away with much more confidence that not only do you have responsible AI, but you also have secure AI. So it doesn't have to be an either or, depending on what your appetite for that is and budget for that matter. Now, the NIST AI RMF, very similar to ISO 23894 and ISO 42001. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's about managing risk of AI and not whether the right controls are in place, the right controls are functioning, and the right controls are scaled appropriately to ensure that they're serving their function. So, again, you just have to understand what's important to you and what you're getting based on doing these different assessments, because there's similarities, in some cases a little bit of overlap, but there is differences in the function that they provide. Keith, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts.
No, I mean, I think we've pretty much covered it, pretty well. I think kind of like you're saying, one of the unique aspects of high trust is very specific, measurable, testable controls, as opposed to just kind of broad or categories of practices that ought to be in place, but are not terribly prescriptive. And so, from a you could hire, I guess, a third party to audit you against those other criteria. But again, when it comes to the high trust AI security certification, you've got prescriptive controls that not only have one set of external eyes on it, which would be the assessor firms such as Sherry Beckert, but also high trust eyes on it as well to validate that those controls actually are implemented in accordance with the control requirements. Yeah.
And Ryan, I know you're mentioning some of the questions. Another one that we had a little earlier around the R2 and AI. Can you do those at the same time? Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
In fact, that's the recommended path for anybody that's doing one of the HITRUST AI assessments is pick E1, I1, or R2, any of the three, as your core baseline assessment, and then have AI take place at the same exact time. You'll submit those together, and then our team will review both. And if things look good, you get two certifications. In this case, you get an R2 certification and the AI2 security certification from HITRUST. So definitely submit together. We require that underlying baseline security assessment to qualify for the AI certification.
I
That's
think the
good.
only thing I would add to that is, if you're familiar with the HITRUST R2, it's a 2-year certification, as Keith mentioned earlier. There is an assessment that happens at the 12-month mark called the interim assessment. The interim assessment will be inclusive of some of the AI controls that were a part of the initial certification effort. So just be prepared for that. It will make the interim a little bit bigger. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact sampling criteria or how many controls we would sample from the original, but it's a part of the equation.
Yeah, it's definitely not all 44. Much smaller than that.
Correct. Yeah.
That's right.
We had a question around AWS. AWS does have a listing of all of their high trust assessments and certifications on their website, and you can always contact your representative if you're using them as a CSP for different services. If you're looking for the high trust certification from them, our best advice: ask them for it, and they can let you know what the latest update is for getting those options and certifications, whether it's that specific one or another one of their high trust certifications. They've been very high trust familiar for a while, so they've got pretty detailed instructions on the page. But the rep that you have will be your best bet to getting those reports, Joe.
Yeah. To answer the question more directly, they are not currently certified. To Matt's point, ask them where they're at. It's my understanding that they're trying to figure out what they need to do in order to achieve certification. I don't know what the timelines are, but I think that brings up a point that we probably should just cover really quickly around shared responsibility. So if you're familiar with High Trust, we have this shared responsibility program where we'll use AWS as an example. If you have whatever environment built in AWS, they're managing environmental, physical security, sometimes access control type of controls on your behalf, disaster recovery, business continuity. You don't have to go ask them to test the data center to make sure that all the environmental controls are in place. You actually just hit a request button in MyCSF. It goes to AWS, they approve it, and the results of their certification are populated in your assessment. So it alleviates a lot of the legwork of trying to get that done. We will replicate that model for the AI controls as the AI developers achieve certification. So in the future, you should be able to inherit some of the 44 controls from an AI model provider, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Definitely. We're getting close to time. There's actually a good question here. Um, Keith, I'll start with you then. What's one piece of advice you'd give an organization starting their AI journey? It looks like Sarah's looking for that information. So, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say definitely don't wait. We've kind of mentioned that a couple of times. Start taking action now. AI is here. It's been around. It's not going away. So just start now and take action. And a couple of other things. I would kind of go back to what I said earlier in terms of getting that. Commitment internally, getting all the key stakeholders aligned that action needs to be taken, because it's more than just security, it's more than just IT, it's more than just compliance. It's going to take a collaborative effort across the organization. So really, just kind of being a champion and getting that kind of mind frame internally, and then contact someone to an external assessor firm such as Cherry Beckert or someone else to help you kind of think through what are the things you need to do. So you're definitely going to need to choose a framework to model after, to help guide your thinking in terms of how to actually put some good governance and security around your AI systems. And so developing policies and procedures and standards to help govern that and kind of set the direction of what needs to be done, what the expectations are internally. And then if you choose to get some third-party assurance around that, then definitely contacting a company like Cherry Beckert to help you kind of make sure that those controls are developed, they're rightly aligned with all the applicable risk for that system, and it can provide some third-party assurance to test it. So that's what I'd
Yeah,
say.
yeah. Start early for sure. Ryan, how about you? Anything that you would add to advice for somebody thinking about AI, scared of AI, ready for AI? What would you say?
I guess I would say a couple things. One, don't be intimidated. I get a sense that people are intimidated by AI as a general topic. And I've even seen third party risk management programs just in analysis paralysis on how they should weave in AI into their current TPRM programs and asking their vendors about this stuff. And then what do they do with it? And my advice to them is similar to Keith's: don't wait, get started, don't be intimidated. And you're going to need organizational buy in. I think Keith mentioned that earlier. Security can't be won, if you will, within an organization purely by the security leaders and the security team. It's an organizational fight. So get organizational buy in. And then the last thing I would offer is bring in an external assessor as soon as possible. They are 100% your Sherpa on this journey. And the ones that are the most successful are the ones that are doing HITRUST work frequently and have a good relationship with HITRUST, because we are our own animal. We have our own vernacular. We have our own way that assessments need to be conducted. It's not like SOC 2. It is not like a NIST assessment or ISO or anything else. The most successful external assessors like Keith are the ones that are talking to us every day, getting feedback from our quality assurance team on what our expectations are, and they're learning over time. So they are the ones who are going to set you up for success. So you got to trust them.
There's a question from Joe in the chat, and I'll kick it off with this one. What are two or three items we believe should be done? Joe, I'll give you one really good one. You should do 44 times. It's read the controls that we've produced. It may sound simple, but honestly, that's your best place to start. In that document Ryan posted up earlier in the chat, we're very transparent about what these 44 AI security controls look like, and we want the audience and anybody considering this as an option to get familiar and look through them and say, do we have this in place today? Do we need to start putting this in place tomorrow? And that's where, if you need assistance with how to monitor these controls or how to implement these controls, that's where our assessor community is here to help provide you with step-by-step plans on how to get ready for these things. But definitely get familiar with the controls would be my first piece of advice. Keith or Ryan, anything you want to add to Joe's question there?
Yeah, I would add to your comments. Be on the lookout for shadow AI. Like we have this concept of shadow IT that plagued us for years and still plagues us to a certain degree. Shadow AI is a very real thing, and it's a very challenging thing. So when you're going through, building the governance program, considering shadow AI, finding ways to uncover shadow AI, I think will be really, really critical to protecting whatever you need to protect internally.
Absolutely. Keith, anything else you want to add or any closing thoughts on that one?
Yeah, not necessarily to that question, but maybe just kind of on a positive note with some confidence here, because I know it can seem to be daunting. But I kind of said it at the beginning. One of the things that excites me is about the opportunity, right? And so view your company's adoption of AI as an opportunity and be a leader in the organization to kind of champion using those opportunities strategically and effectively with good governance and security. Because I think one of the biggest benefits of having a good AI system in place from a security and governance perspective, even I'm going to pitch it one more time, the HITRUST AI Security Certification is really market differentiation, right? Because as more and more companies are going to be using AI, it's going to be everywhere. There's going to be companies that use it and do it well, and companies that don't. And there's going to be breaches and all sorts of things. You don't want to be one of those companies, right? You want to be one of those companies that are leaders in this space that can come out early and say, hey, we've got good controls in place, and here's a piece of paper to prove it that we do. That's just going to set you apart, because we're already starting to see questions around AI come in on these, like these third-party vendor assessments and things like that, and all of these kind of like due diligence in terms of due diligence requirements and things like that. And so that's not going to go away. That's only going to increase. And people want to know, like, can we trust your AI system? And so if you start this journey early now, and you just continue to make consistent progress, you're going to be able to provide some good assurance. You're going to be able to set yourself apart from other organizations in your space, and you're ultimately going to get more business and more respect as a result of that. So I would encourage you to not think of it as something daunting or something just to kind of check the box, but really as an opportunity to set your organization apart from all the others.
Definitely, completely agree with that. Ryan, any closing thoughts for the audience as we get ready to close out today?
I don't think I have anything additional other than what we've already discussed, but I want to, thank you for keeping me honest and keeping me on track here, because I do have a tendency to get on my soapbox. And Keith, for joining us. Like, I think your insights are invaluable. You're on the front lines every single day looking at this stuff, helping organizations get through it and get better. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say to the audience, other than just thank you, there's a lot of information out there about AI. HITRUST, we have a whole page dedicated to this topic. Feel free to look through. It's free to read things on our website, so take a look through the content. It's also free to pick up the phone. So give Keith a call, give us a shout, let us know if you have any questions around these topics. It's new, it's exciting. We don't want it to feel daunting. So we're here to help. Ask questions if you have them. If there's anything we didn't cover today, let us know. We're happy to get in touch with you. We've recorded the session, so we'll be sending that out to everybody. But please, if you're interested in exploring these options, let us know. We're here to help on that journey. So with that, I say thank you everyone that stuck around, and looking forward to talking again soon.